My name is Richard Askam, and I am one of those strange people that actually enjoys doing this. I actually do this for a living, so it's a little bit weird for me today to work on a Saturday, if I'm honest. But I have been in America recently, and one of the things that I love about the Americans is the legendary status that they afford their sports stars. And as a result, those sports stars' future is completely sorted for them. They have no worries about what their future looks like, and they don't have to give it any thought at all because they are treated almost as royalty. Does anybody know the picture that is on the screen now is a legendary ice hockey player, Wayne Gretzky, thank you very much. And he is known universally as the Great One. And he was asked recently what made him better than any other hockey player that's ever lived. And his answer was quite useful for today's future topic. He said, it's not because I was the quickest, and it's not because I was the strongest, but where everybody else skated to where the puck was, I skated to where the puck was going to be. He knew what the future looked like, and as a result, he became a legend. And it got me thinking, what does the future look like? And the worrying thing for me was earlier on this year, my future became my present. And I turned 50 on April the 1st this year. The good news is 50 is only 14 in Scrabble, so in dog years, I'm only 14. But it forced me to look back on the first half of my life, because let's be honest, 50 is only halfway, so it's what you do in the second half that's important as the first. And of course, a wise man once said that the only point in looking backwards is to see where you've come from. So I thought this was an opportunity to potentially change the way that my future could be, and perhaps possibly create a new future for myself. And many years ago, I found myself in Australia, and I spent quite a lot of time there watching TV, and there was an advertising campaign for the Northern Territories, which if any of you have ever been to Australia, you'll know that the Northern Territories is effectively a swamp. And they were trying to create it as a tourist destination. And the strapline for the TV commercial was, if you never ever go, you'll never ever know. And I've used that throughout my entire working life as a reason to be in rooms like today, because what's the worst that can happen? Your future can happen if you let it. And that's a maxim that I've lived by ever since. And occasionally, you find yourselves at those crossroads, those moments in time when you could either choose to sit in a dark room in your underwear, eating Rice Krispies and drinking vodka. And let's face it, we've probably all contemplated that at some point in our time. Or you can choose the pathway of hope, which is to create a new version of the story that you were previously on. And that's something that I found myself doing. And I take task with the word entrepreneur, unfortunately, and apologies for earlier speakers today, because for me the word entrepreneur makes no sense. For anybody that speaks French, the word entre means between, and the word preneur means taker. So if you describe yourself as an entrepreneur, you are effectively saying you are a between taker, which to me has no logical sense whatsoever. Whereas the word risquepreneur is, of course, risk taker. And I've been in that plane a few times. I've jumped off that cliff several times in my working life. And on the last occasion I did that, I actually invited somebody to join me on that plane ride. And rather annoyingly and frustratingly for me, they chose halfway down that plane ride to throw me out of the plane and actually didn't afford me the privilege of a parachute. So what happened was that I needed to find and create a new future for myself. And I decided that the time was right at the age of 50 to build a working life with no walls and to become a digital nomad. And I'm quite fortunate that my brain is connected to my mouth in such an order that I can do this for a living, and whether that's by the spoken word or the written word. But did I have the attributes that were necessary to be able to do that as an individual? Was I open-minded? I'm here today. I think that's a fair assumption that that's a tick. Am I friendly? I'll let you be the judge of that. Am I adventurous? Well, sort of. I'm probably the world's worst tourist, if I'm honest. If I'm on my own, I tend to stay around the hotel. So I'm not so sure that that really fits the bill. Am I tech savvy? Absolutely not. I'm not really comfortable with a clicker that only has one button, if I'm honest, but it's probably something that I don't need to worry too much about because there are cleverer people than me. So the thing that I questioned most of all was the discipline. Did I have the discipline to have a freelance working life with no structure? Unfortunately for me, one of the lucky things that happened in my life was that I met my beautiful wife nearly 20 years ago. And when I met her, she worked in the radio industry in London, and she smoked and she drank, and she generally had a very nice time. And I thought, I'm onto a good life here. And then she retrained as a personal trainer, and my life effectively ended. But rather cleverly, she suggested to me a point that could bring discipline into my working life. And her suggestion was to bring that discipline forward in the form of exercise. No surprise from a personal trainer. So she challenged me. She challenged me to run a mile a day every day for a month. And during that time, make that the focal point of my day. So that became the structure of a life without walls that gave me an anchor point in my working life, that every day I knew I had to run this mile. And whether it took me 7 minutes to run it, which it did once, or 10 minutes to run it, which it did most times, occasionally 11, which was a Sunday, that gave me a discipline point and a focal point that allowed my working life as a digital nomad to be possible. And it's something that I will be forever grateful for her to do, and it's something that allows me to do events such as this today. So if anybody ever really questions the future that you wish to have for yourself, I give you one piece of advice. If they're arguing with you, before you argue back, run a mile in their shoes. Because at the very least, you'll be a mile away from them. And at the very least, you'll have their shoes. Thank you very much.